You want your clients to be able to compete with the biggest people in the industry. You want them to be on that playlist next to Drake and Jay-Z and whatever. Hey, man, there's one thing that you can do before, during, and after every mix to improve the quality tenfold. What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. I'm Wavy Wayne from Wavy.wav. And you already know what I'm about to say. If you're new here, this channel is all about helping you to record and mix better and faster. So join all those other people who didn't hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit the notification bell, and then jump down in the comments and just say, "What up, Wavy?" Or tell me what you learned in this video. This video is all about using reference songs while mixing. How should we use a reference? Why should we use a reference? What is it that we are looking for while we're using a reference mix? That's what I'm going to unpack for y'all today. And yeah, man, I hope that you find it useful. So first thing first, what is reference mixing? Basically, a reference mix is going to be a song that is in the similar category, similar vein of whatever song it is that you're mixing. So if I'm mixing a heavily auto-tuned track with 808s and, you know, everything like that, I might just go for a future record to use as my reference. Okay, so you get what I'm saying there. You're going to pick a song that is professionally mixed to use as the reference for your mix that you may be working on. Now, don't get this twisted. By no means are you to copy exactly what's happening in this next mix, in the professional mix. That's not going to get you anywhere. For one, you need to practice making your own sound and being unique. If you try to emulate the reference, you'll end up with a poor emulation of some professional mix engineer's song that just doesn't add up, right? But there are a few things that we can learn by referencing and ways that we can improve our mixes. So one thing that I'm looking for when I am referencing a mix is the balance, right? Especially if you're working on genres that maybe you haven't worked in before. Like maybe you have been tasked with mixing a country song and you haven't really mixed a country song before. Maybe you need to know how loud should the guitars be in relation to the drums? Where should those vocals be in relation to the keyboard or pianos, right? So kind of using it that way as a point of balance for your reference, that's one great way to make the most of a reference track. So when I'm listening for that balance, sometimes I'll listen to see, all right, man, they got their 808 pretty loud in comparison to the snare drum or vice versa, right? And then you can decide if you want to make similar decisions. Now, yeah, using some of the ideas that the professional has done with this popular song may help you, especially if, you know, if it's a song that's award winning and everybody loves the way it sounds, including you. You can borrow some of the ideas and techniques that they may have been using on your own mix. But again, you're mixing a totally different song. So again, certain stuff like balance, right? Width, that's a huge one, especially if you are doing any mastering or stereo bus processing in your session. Understanding how wide commercial mixes are will really, using a reference can help you really understand that. So I would definitely use references to make sure that the mix that I'm working on is wide enough, right? That is just really wide, okay? Saturation is another thing. Does your mix feel like it's limp? Is it not full and full of body? Does it have some chest in it? Or is it too dynamic? Is it not dynamic enough? Again, these are things that we can pick up from the reference, the frequency content. A lot of times you may be mixing, maybe you don't trust your studio monitors that well, or maybe your room is having some issues that things are a little off balance, right? Well, listening for the frequency content, how bright is the commercial mix compared to yours? How much low end is on that commercial mix compared to what you might be working on? Those things can easily tell us whether we need to make adjustments in our own mix, right? Because obviously we're going to trust the commercial mix. Long as you pick the right one, you can trust that that is closer to how things should sound, how most people are expecting this similar type of song to sound. So if yours is a little dull and not as bright, then that's definitely something to consider, right? Our point here is that you want your clients to be able to compete with the biggest people in the industry. You want them to be on that playlist next to Drake and Jay-Z and whatever, and Kanye, you know, all these different ideas. So once you present them with the final product, it's best that you have already tested against these staples in the music, right? That you've already lined your song up against Future and Drake, and you know, all right, cool, well, this 808 is slapping just as hard as the 808 on this Drake song, so that if they play back to back, everybody's not going to stop and turn around and look at the DJ like, what the hell are you playing now? Okay, that's what we want to avoid. So those are a few different things. You can also use references to get ideas for effects and different stuff like that. But that's the main thing right there. Is one more thing that I'm gonna mention too is loudness. Again, this is more on the mastering side of things. But if you're learning to kind of master on your own, using a reference to determine loudness is definitely going to help to make sure that you hitting that sweet spot. Yeah, looking at the meters is great, but just lining your song up next to the professionally mixed and master song is going to instantly let you know if you are anywhere near the ballpark, man. And trust the reference that you pick. Don't lie to yourself and be like, well, my mix sound better than a reference, because most of the time that might not be the case. But again, it might be the case. So you're using it as a reference, not as an end-all be-all to tell you what to do with your mix, because every song is going to be different. You need to approach it differently and approach it with some creativity. So here's how I would first address a reference mix. This is a blank session, but all I did was import a mastered file inside of this session so that I can use it for this demonstration. One thing that you will notice is that I'm going to also put a VU meter here so we can watch the voltage units here. And I always calibrate my VU to -15. But one thing that you will notice is that the reference, most of the time, especially if it's mastered, it's going to be extremely loud. It's going to be a lot louder than whatever it is that you are working on during your mix. One of the first things you want to do is gain match that reference down to about the level that you're expecting to mix to. So while I'm mixing, I like my peaks to be at about -15 dB, which will be 0 dB on this scale here. So what I'm going to do is just simply adjust the fader, or I can actually use my trim plugin, but it'll have the same effect ultimately. And as this beat is playing, I'm going to trim it back some to where we're just hitting about 0 dB on the V0, to where we're just hitting about 0 VU here on my meter. All right, so that looks like that's going to be a good starting spot for me. So I've reduced the level of the beat, and now as I'm mixing, well, of the reference track, and now as I'm mixing, I can solo this reference, listen to it occasionally, and then take it off solo and mute it while I'm working with the other tracks in my session, okay? It's good to just bring it into your session, go ahead and import it in, keep it muted. Now, another thing to realize, though, is that if you're doing any mix bus processing, make sure that the reference track is going out to a different output, okay? Let me give you an example of what I mean. So I'm just gonna make a few tracks here. We're gonna make 10 tracks, and let's just color code these a little bit differently, okay? We'll go with that color. That's too close. All right, we'll go with yellow. All right, bet. So I got all these tracks, and we'll just imagine that those are all the tracks that I'm mixing, right? My kicks and snares and vocals and all of that. Typically, what I would do is route all of these to a mix bus. So I'm just gonna easily do this. And if I'm doing stuff that you don't understand, I'm taking it to another level. I have videos on how to set up and use buses as well. So feel free to search any of these topics that are outside of the main topic here. Search for them on my channel, find a tutorial so that you can make sure you understand each thing in depth. So I'm setting up basically a sub master here, and we're just gonna call this my mix bus. So if you notice, all of the tracks that I'm mixing here are routed out to my mix bus, and that's coming here. Now, I don't want my reference to be routed to that mix bus though, because if I'm using, and we can move this VU over, but if I'm using anything like a limiter or something like that during my mix, I don't want to limit the reference, right? I don't want to EQ or do anything to change the reference. So I'm routing the reference directly out. So that's exactly what I'm hearing. And I have all the tracks that I'm mixing feeding through a mix bus where I could do any processing. I should have had it on this mix bus channel. Sorry about that. But I can do any processing that I want to via this mix bus and it not affect what's happening on my reference channel. Super important there. There's also another way that I like to use references, and it's using the Ozone 9 plugin. It's pretty dope, actually. So once you got your mix rocking and you insert the Ozone 9 plugin, let's just search for it. They have a dope little feature here that allows you to basically import a reference here. So you just simply click on reference, you add it, you import that reference into this plugin. I'm just going to choose any random song. I'm not going to play it so we don't get copyright here. I'm not sure it is, but you can choose sections, right, that you want to play. And then while the session is playing, if you click this little circle, it'll play the reference. When you take it off, it'll play your mix. So that stops from having to go to solo and mute and do all that if you have this plugin. Now, again, this plugin is not necessary to do this, but it's really great, especially once you get to the mastering stage, to be able to easily jump back and forth between a mastered song of mastered reference and then the song that you're working on mastering and limiting in your mix. And you'll see here that it also has the option for gain control as well, because that's very important to match the gain, right? If one thing is louder than the other, we'll automatically perceive the loudest one as sounding better, right? And it's a lot easier to match differences when everything is at the same level, and to pick up on real differences, whether something is brighter or darker or more punchy, as long as the levels are the same. I definitely recommend that you use references on your mixes, if not anything, right before you feel like you're finished with that mix. If you don't start off with a reference in the beginning, that's completely fine. You can also use references in another way, like if your client has done a rough mix of the song that you're mixing already and they have a rough mix, you can use that as a reference to figure out what kind of effects they like, how they treated the vocals or anything like that. Mainly the effects, what kind of reverb, delay, if they did any special effects or drops or anything like that. I use the client's rough mix as a reference for that too, right? I definitely suggest that you use a reference mix and judge your song that you're mixing against the reference before sending it out to a client and saying that it's the final project or the final version of that, man. You'll be surprised at some of the simple things that you might pick up on just by comparing your song to a commercially released reference. All right. I'm Wavy Wayne from Wavy.com. I hope that this has been helpful. If it has, hit the thumbs up. If you have any other questions involving references, you can drop down in the comments and let's create a community around it. All right. Don't forget that the Wavy Seals Elite is my membership group where I go in depth on different topics. You have weekly live meetings with me and my mentors. We have exclusive content that you just can't find here on YouTube. So if you're interested in taking your learning and your love for audio knowledge to the next level, check out my website, wavywayne.com, explore the Wavy Seals Elite, and I'll see y'all next time. Be dope.